Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Yo antah pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjeevayati akhila shakti darasvadamna अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाभूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today is the 10th class, and as you know, we've been doing the contemplation of Katha Upanishad for about 4 months. So before I go into the substance of Katha Upanishad, it's always a good idea to go back and see what we have done, and also to try and understand how we are actually practically implementing what Yama is teaching us in Katha Upanishad. Yeah, I think this is fundamental for us. There is no point in just knowing the theory part of it. You know, theory is all well and good. Having the theory, what is the background knowledge of Katha Upanishad is good. But how do we apply this? Thousands of years ago, the Rishis and the society in Bharatvarsha was applying the teachings of Katha Upanishad in their societies. So in the modern times, how do we kind of adopt this? How do we apply the teachings of Katha Upanishad or the teachings of Gita in our modern day life? Yeah, so this is a practical problem for those of us who are living in the West and those of us who are living in a very modern society. Okay, so when we were doing, I think 2 months ago, when we were doing the issues around the second boon that Nachiketa asked Yama, Yama at that point, if you can recall, made a very, very significant statement. He said, Trinachiketaha, Tribiretya Sandhim, Trikarma Krit, Tarati, Janma Mrityuhu. So he said, those who does Trikarma Krit, they will cross the cycles of birth and death. So this Trikarma Krit, we have spent a lot of time talking about what is this Trikarma Krit, and we understood that the Trikarma Krit is divided into two words, Trikarma and Krit. Krit means do. Trikarma, three types of karmas. What are they? And we understood from chapter 18, verse 5. So who would want to recite this verse, a very important verse of Gita? Who wants to take up the 18th verse, 18th chapter, 5th verse, and recite for us today, please? The chapter, the verse that talks about what are the three types of karma that we should all be doing. So who wants to take this up, or shall I just pick one? Okay. Yeah, go for it, Pragnesh. Thank you.
Thank you. Yajna dana tapa karma natyajam karyameva tat yajno danam tapaschaiva pavanani manishanam.
Wonderful, Pragnesh. So beautiful. So Trikarma means, what are the three karma? Yajna, Dana, and Tapaha. So Yajna, Dana, and Tapaha. And we take this particular verse, Dana. Okay, so who is going to recite this key verse of what Dhanam or charity actually is? And Krishna describes that very well in chapter 17, verse 20. So who wants to take that? Veena Kankanwadi ji, do you want to take that verse? And then 1806, perhaps maybe Harish wants to get himself ready for the next verse. So Veena ji, go for that verse, please. 1720.
Danam diyate nupakarine deshe kale cha patre cha taddanam satvikam smrutam.
Wonderful. Thank you, Veena ji. So charity or dana given to a worthy person simply because it is the right thing to do. And we need to give the dana without consideration of anything in return, at the proper time and in the proper place. And that kind of dana, Krishna says, that is charity done in a satvika swabhava. So that is also important. The second karma is dana, to be given to the right folks at the right time and at the right place. Yeah. So, and then in 1806, Krishna then says how these things needs to be done. So Harish ji, go for it.
Yeah. Etanyaphi tu karmani sangam tyaktva phalani cha kartavyani ti me partha nishchitam matamuttamam.
Beautiful. So these activities must be performed without attachment and expectations for rewards. This is my definite and supreme verdict, O Arjuna, said Krishna in the last chapter of Gita. So when you take this verse in Katha Upanishad of what Yama is actually teaching Nachiketa and what Krishna is teaching Arjuna, we actually need to be thinking about what are the practical situations where we can actually put this in practice. So one such incident happened this week, and we are all familiar with what happened, but I just want to give you a summary of how this came about. So Indian embassy in Hungary sought ISKCON's help in arranging food and water for the Indian students arriving to board flights to India. So that was going on. And our friend Mohana Dasa from Hungary, he just sent me a text and said, look, we are doing this. And he was sharing some pictures and photos of what they were trying to achieve. So at that point, I immediately felt like we got to do something here. So, and that's how this conversation happened. And Manjunath ji very enthusiastically said, let's go for it. So that gave us the impetus to just go and start doing something about this. And let's do a fundraising and raise some money to help folks, not only coming from India, but also from Ukraine, who are all been suffering in this, something that is beyond their control. So as a team, friends, we were able to raise 1,700 euros in 48 hours. And we transferred this to Hungary. So what does that tell us? We gave dana at a proper time and at a proper place to the people who needed the most, So that was done within 48 hours to offer it to people. And this morning, Sudarshan had shared some video of how this, our money that we have raised, this is probably not even a drop in the ocean. This is probably an insignificant contribution. But what we have done in this period of crisis, I hope has actually helped some humans and has tried to alleviate some sufferings. So in that spirit, we really need to pat our backs. We need to clap ourselves. And for being grateful, I think we should be grateful for Krishna for giving us this opportunity, and also giving us this opportunity to put the teaching of Yama into practice. Okay, so I just wanted to share that very interesting thought before going to the next the class proper. But what I've also asked Sudarshan ji is just so that we can remember those folks who are suffering, which is well beyond their control. Let us not look into the politics or the non-politics of it, but just think about the suffering of people. And I think we should have a 20 minutes period of silence, and then followed by Sudarshan will break the silence for us and then maybe tell us something about charity.
Okay, 20 minutes or 20 seconds?
20 seconds, sorry, 20 seconds. So just a period of silence for 20 seconds, please.
Okay. Madhu, what do you want me to talk about charity generally, or?
just generally, I don't know whether we have some views on this from our organization, just about a minute or so, Sudarshan, before we move on to the class proper.
Well, I think as Madhuji rightly said, and we in Bhagavad Gita, whatever. So it's charity is something which it has to be part of our everyday life, not just we do it once in a while. And the second thing is it's a sort of where only when we think like it's not that we are giving, then I'm sure like that goes more in line with the Bhagavad Gita teaching. It's not that like we don't own anything. So if I say I given this amount to charity, that amount to charity, it doesn't make any sense because I don't even own it in the first place. Who am I to even give it? So that is very important, and it's something to take it as part of our day-to-day life. Some amount of our earned money every month, we can say this is for charity, rather than waiting for retirement and then I'll spend that amount and then may never happen. And charity is not about just giving money. Even you're giving your time is also a charity. Like Madhuji is doing, is preparing slides every week and reading about it, what to take class. That is also like it's like a charity of giving his knowledge. So and similarly, anything else, anybody giving time for anything else is also a charity. And so if you cannot give the money, then give your time, and sometimes even spread the word. That itself is a charity. You can spread the word that somebody is this Upanishad class, or this charity needs money, I can't give, can you give? So don't think that I do not have enough money, so I can't do charity now. I got a lot of commitments, I cannot do charity now. But it can be anything. Sometimes can be physically, even just going and washing the vessels at the temple, gurudwara, or anything like can be a charity. So, and once you start doing the charity only, you will probably know that like what are the demands and what are the needs there. And eventually like you will meet a lot of people actually. So the first worry you get is like, why am I being alone, and am I going to be the full responsible person for doing all these sort of things? That worry will go only when you start doing it, because you'll find that there's so many people doing it, so many people will support you, and so much so that you don't need to give anything. If you give £1, there may be like 100 people ready to give 10 or 20 pounds. So that is way it works. So I think let us all start, and well, I'm sure most of us have started doing this already, and most of you are doing a wonderful job. So it's only a question of continue to do whatever we do. And remember, charity is not just about donating money. It could be about vidyadan, like teaching somebody. It could be anything. Even to speak kindly to somebody is a charity, like because that's their social isolation. How are you? What can I do for you? So everything is a charity. So don't think it's just the money. Yeah. Thank you, Madhu. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah. So in that spirit, thank you, Sudarshan. So let's move to the class proper. Okay. So what were we doing last time? So we spent as I said, quite a lot of time talking about this. Let me just run through these verses. Anyat shreyo anyaduta eva preyaha te ube nana arte purusham sinitaha. तयोः श्रेय आददानस्य साधु भवति हीयते अर्थात् यवुप्रेयो वृणीते सत्वं प्रियान् प्रियरूपांष्टकामान् अविद्यायन् नाचिकेतो अत्यस्राक्षिः नैतां शृङ्कां वित्तमयीम् आप्तो यस्यां मज्जन्ति बहवो मनुष्याः श्रेयश्च प्रेयश्च मनुष्यं येतः तौ संपरित्य विभिनक्ति धीरः श्रेयो हि धीरो अभिप्रेयसो वृणीते प्रेयो मंदे योगक्षेमात् वृणीते दूरं येते विपरीते विसूचि अविद्या याच विद्येति ज्ञाता विद्या अभिप्सितं नाचिकेतसं मन्ये नत्वा कामा बहवो अलोलुपन्ता. And then last week we spent a lot of time talking about ignorance. Where is ignorance? Who has ignorance? What are the views from different schools of Vedanta? And I hope that was quite provocative, and it made you think of what are the views from different Vedanta darshanas. And then we did this very important verse. Avidyayam antare vartamanaha स्वयं धीराः पंडितं मन्यमानाः दन्द्रम्यमानाः परियन्ति मूढाः अन्धे नैव नियमायता अन्धाः. This is such a timely statement for us to remember with regards to what's happening around the world, what's happening in Europe. This is the situation. The blind is following the blind. Everybody is blind and there's ignorance to the core. They're all following each other, and what is going on? They're all following in the deep pits. They're all falling into the deep bits. We are seeing this in front of our eyes. Every time you switch on the news, that is what is going on. So this is such a timely verse from Yama, who actually says, look at the world and how people are surrounded by ignorance, and they feel that they are very safe with a fence called ignorance. And they feel they are the cleverest people. They feel they are the panditas. But what is actually happening? The blind is following the blind, and they are all falling into the pit, which is the samsara. And then such an ignorant person, for him, people who are covered with ignorance, this is what happens to them. Na samparayaha pratibhatipalam pramadyantam vitta mohena modam ayam loko nasti parayitimani punah punah vasham apadyate me. So these fellows who are ignorant, they again and again they come into my clutches. Punaha vasham apadyate me. That is what Yama is saying. They again come to my clutches, in the sense that they are again born, they die, they go to Yamaloka, spend to Naraka, sometime in Swarga or Naraka, and again come to Mrityuloka. So again and again they're going through these cycles, these ignorant people. Yeah, and there, this particular verse, again, we dissected it out. Ayam loko nasti parayitimani. So we looked at three aspects of it. It can be ayam lokaha nasti paraha. That means all that is there is only the pleasures in this world. There is only this world. There is nothing called the beyond. There is nothing called mukti and moksha. Everything is in this material world. We live once, and in that life, let's enjoy, and that is it. So that is a Charvaka view. Then there is the other view. Ayam loko nasti parayiti. There is the other second view is this world that we live in is an illusion. All that is real is that the supreme is the only real. All others are illusions. So that is the second view. The third view is Ayam loko nasti paraha. Neither does this world exist nor the world beyond. So Yama, in this particular verse, he censures all these folks, and he says these are all ignorant people. They really don't understand the state of reality. They don't understand the purpose of existence. So then the question there is, what about, so here we have now discussed so far, only few of them go towards prayers, whereas most of us who are surrounded by ignorance or avidya, we go towards prayers. Okay, so now I've just got a question here just to open up the discussion and get you guys thinking is, so suppose there is a person, I've just put this jiva here, and this jiva comes to this crossroad, or this could be the T junction on the roads, and then this jiva decides whether do I turn left or do I turn right. Okay, so the question there is, why do we choose a certain path? Why do we choose either Shreyas or prayers? Why don't we all use Shreyas? Why don't we do that? Why most of us use only choose the path of prayers? So anybody wants to contribute here? Pragneshji.
Sorry, I'm always very enthusiastic like a child. Anyway, karya, sanskar, ichha, karya, and a phala. That's the vicious cycle. So as they say that what you do becomes habit, what you become habit becomes your character, and so on, and character becomes destiny. That sort of philosophy.
Thank you, Pragneshya. Very well put. Anybody else wants to step in and say, why do we choose a certain path? Anybody has any further contributions to make? Pratibhaji.
Is there something to do with the swabhava of the jiva, which makes us,
Yeah, thank you, Pratibhaji.
There is also the karmas as well, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. So all of us
Madhu, I also want to say what Pratibhaji has said. Like, I think it is like your sankalpa, whatever, or swabhava, whatever. But it is what, unconsciously at a subconscious level, whatever you are aspiring, and that aspiring is sort of continuation from your previous birth as well. Like all your unsolved desires, unattained desires, which you don't even know. You don't even have access to it until unless you do something, and that's what when you realize, is that what I was aspiring for, if it's something bad. So that is in one sense, in our psychology, psychotherapy, it's very, very important. Because you go and do something, and then it's completely out of character to what you have been brought up as, or something like that. Then that's when probably you realize that's what you probably aspired for in this birth or in the previous birth.
Excellent, Sudarshan. Thank you very much for that contribution. So I think all of us got most, various aspects to this problem as to why we choose a certain path. And I think Devalji mentioned karma, which is important. Our past karmas influence what we do. Pratibhaji mentioned about the swabhava of jivas, or our inherent nature that prompts us to do something. So all these points, think about these things, because there are two aspects, right? There is the swabhava and there is the prabhava. Prabhava is the environmental forces or the environmental influences that is there, that also influences what we do. So if we are mindful and conscious of the environment, then maybe those things we can change, that we might be able to change and make a positive change for ourselves. And instead of constantly taking the turn towards prayers, we might be able to take a turn towards shreyas, which is what our aim should be. So what about the ones that try to move towards knowledge? So those ones that want to change their prabhava and then act according to their swabhava, what about the ones that try to move towards knowledge then? So Yama then puts a very beautiful verse here. And again, I would want you guys to be contributing around Gita 2:28 and Gita 7:3 here. So think about volunteers, but let me go through this verse. So for the ones that are moving towards knowledge, who want to make an attempt to move towards Shreyas, Yama says, that is very hard, mate. That is really hard. Shravanaya api bahubir yo nalabhyaha. Shrunvanto api bahavo yamna vidyuhu. Ashcharya vakta kushalo asya labdha. Ashcharya nyata kushalo anushishtaha. So there's a beautiful, beautiful verse. So what does it say? So Yama says, yes, you may want to move towards knowledge, but mind you, learning Vedantic philosophy is not easy. You have to invest time into it. And that is what we have been doing for the past 2 years, 2 years now, actually. For 2 years, we are putting our effort to learn the Vedantic philosophy, because it just doesn't come easily, and you need to put a lot of effort. And that's what Yama is saying here. Shravana api bahubir yo nalabhyaha. So this is our situation. Even if you want to hear Vedanta, there may not be an opportunity to learn. When there is somebody to teach Vedanta, many of us are not interested. We may be too busy with other things. So that is what Yama is saying. Shravanaya api bahubir na labhyaha. Shrunvanto api bahavo yamna vidyuhu. Even after hearing, many do not understand. And that is why our rishis tell us, revise, do Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. Shravana and Manana are so important for Vedantic philosophy and learning. And Veda Vyasa, for example, put a famous sutra, Avritihi Asakrita Upadeshat. Avritihi means repeatedly, again and again. Go back to the scriptures, go back and read, go back and Shravana and Manana. Because why we should do that? Shrunvanto api bahavo yamna vidyuhu. Even after hearing, many do not understand, and you need investment of time and effort into this. And then Yama says, Ashcharyo Vakta. If someone talks Vedanta, that is wonderful, because there are not many folks who want to talk Vedanta. They would be better off talking about their pensions rather than talking about Vedanta. Kushalo Asya Labda. He who receives the knowledge, the student, is also rare and wonderful. And again, in this, Yama is actually commending those students who also want to learn Vedanta. Ashcharya Jnata. After having heard, he who understands Vedanta, that is also wonderful, because you need a lot of effort for that. That is also wonderful, he says. Kushalaha Anushishtaha. From whom? From a proficient teacher. So Yama when he is talking about those who go towards knowledge, he talks about, no, there are three wonders here. Who teaches Vedanta, who can listen Vedanta, and who can understand Vedanta. So again, the message is very clear that there has to be an individual effort to learn Vedantic philosophy or Vedic philosophy. Once that motivation and effort is there, things will automatically fall into place over a period of time. That is very, very clear, particularly if the way we are as a team doing it over the past 2 years with a lot of effort. And I think we are making our journey towards Shreyas. And this is a practical example of what Yama is actually, talking about. Now, I picked up two beautiful verses in Gita, which also picks up the same concept. And as I said before, Katha Upanishad and Gita are very, very similar. In fact, Gita is an exposition of Katha Upanishad. So we should not miss any opportunity to go back to a verse in Gita that also talks about this. So I've got two verses for our benefit. One is 228 and another one is 7:3. So who wants to take up 228? Have I got somebody? Yeah, Veena ji?
Madhu, I can do that. Suresh.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, Suresh, please. Yeah.
आश्चर्यवत् पश्यति कश्चिदेनम् आश्चर्यवत् वदति तथैव चान्यः आश्चर्यवच्चैनमन्यः शृणोति श्रुत्वाप्येनं वेद न चैव कश्चित्.
Thank you, Suresh ji. So that's a beautiful verse from Sankhya Yoga 228 that picks up these kind of thoughts. Who wants to take up 7:3, please? This is a very popular verse. Pragnesh.
Manusyanam sahastreshu kaschid siddhaye yatataamapi siddhanam kaschin ma veti tatvatah.
Beautiful. So the 7:3 is very similar to the verse that Yama is talking about giving that it is not easy. We have to invest time in this. Shravanaya api bahubir yo nalabhyaha shrunvanto api bahavo yamna vidyuhu Ascharya Vakta Kushalo Asya Labda Ascharya Jnata Kushalo Anushishtaha. So when he has said this about this, you got to put invest time and so on. Next question is about what is the approach? So how do we get started? How do we go about doing this? That is the next thing that comes up, isn't it? And here, Yama in the very next verse, he gives you a caution. He gives you a caution as to how you need to approach this, knowing about the supreme being, knowing about these fundamental truths, and how cautious and how careful you have to be. And he says, he actually points out our own limitations here as jivas who have got this body as humans. Yes, we got a sadhana sharira, but we are limited beings. We are finite beings. And Yama is now giving us a warning as to how you need to approach this problem. Here is what we do. Na narena avarena proktaha yesha suvigneyo bahuda chintyamanaha Ananya prokte gatiratra nasti aniyan hi atarkyam anupramana. Okay, the second half is very important, but let's spend some time talking about the first two verses. Na narena avarena proktaha. Okay, so this is what it means. Eshaha narena avarena proktaha. Avara means lower. Nara means us. Proktaha means we say. We say we are such limited beings. So yeah, we are limited, but God is unlimited. We limit the unlimited due to our own limitations. Yeah, this is what we need to be very, very cautious about. We limit the unlimited due to our own limitations. And in that process, we create various sectarian religions and movements, and we have discussions and we disagree and we fight with each other, sometimes with words, sometimes with weapons, and we hurt each other, but we have forgotten to understand that we are limited, but God is unlimited. But because we are unlimited, because we are limited, we try to formulate some ideas. And in that process, we are not doing good job here. Narena avarena proktaha. So most people with limited knowledge, they actually bring down this greatness of the God, the greatness of Brahman by our own limitations. Na suvigneyaha. So this is important. Neya, vigneya, suvigneya. Look at how many prefixes are there. Na means no. So we do not know this Brahman fully. But because of our own limitations, what have we done? Bahuda chintyamanaha. We have come with very many different ideas of God, which is our own creation. We have just created many of the ideas. So Pragnesh, your raising hand is historical, I suppose, unless you want to come in. Thank you. So na suvigneyo bahuda chintyamanaham. And what are all the various ideas that we have created about the supreme Brahman, or this unlimited supreme personality? He has no gunas, or he has only 8 gunas, or he is formless, or he transforms himself to something else. So we come with so many views as humans. We have come with various views about what the Supreme Brahman is. And the next line, what Yama says is, but I'll illustrate this with an example. And he says, Ananya Prokte Gatiratra Nasti. So watch the language of these words. And these are, I mean, philosophers debate these lines a lot, but that is not our purview. But we will look at this from an etymological perspective to some extent and understand what it means. Ananya Prokta. Prokta means he who says, Ananya. Gatihi atra nasti. This is a very, very important telling off by Yama. Yeah. Gatir atra nasti means for that person there is no gati, no scope for progress. What is that no scope of progress? He who says Ananya, I am Ananya. So he who says Ananya Prokte, for him there is no gati, is what Yama is saying in Katha Upanishad. So let's look at what does Ananya mean in this context. So again, we should always not forget that every word used comes in a particular context. So you'll always have to take prakarana and then understand what it means. So what is Ananya here? So it's got two things. Anya. Anya means what? Different. Ananya means non-different. Okay. Anya, Ananya. An plus Anya is Ananya, which means non-different. So this is what the idea of Yama is in this verse. So what is he saying? He who says, so what does Anya means? So we have Nachiketa here, we have Yama here. So these are two souls or jivas that are talking about this supreme Brahman. And our friend Nachiketa has asked that question, what happens to the jivas in moksha? What is Brahman? What is his greatness? And so on and so forth. He's asking that question to Yama. Okay, so in this example, it feels like Yama is different, Nachiketa is different, and they are talking about this different supreme being called Brahman. Okay, but he who considers that all these three are the same, so that is a person called Ananya. Yeah, so Ananya Prokte Gatiratra Nasti. It is for such individuals, I'm sorry to say, Nachiketa, that there is no scope for progress for them. Why? Because this supreme Brahman is Aniyan. He atarkyam anupramanat. He gives a reason. So this is one of the important ways of studying the Upanishad. We should never try to attempt to skim the surface. Once you go into the words and understand the grammar and the language, then you understand the line of thought of Yama. So Yama is here censuring Ananya Prokte Gatiratra Nasti. Why? Aniyan hi atarkyam anupramanat. So what does that mean? Aniyan, and here you think about Anu. Okay, Anu. You and me, we are Anus, we are Jivas, we are Anus. Whereas the Supreme Brahman is Vibhu, he is all pervasive. So that is why Jivas are called Anu. Okay, so this Jiva who is subtlest, whereas that fellow is Aniyan. Aniyan hi anuprabhana, that is, he is subtler than the subtlest. Jivas are smaller than the atom. But this chap, Brahman, he's even inside the jivas and he is subtler than the subtlest. So that is why he's called Aniyan. Okay. In fact, Katha Upanishad, there is a subsequent verse that talks about it, and many of you would be very familiar with this verse. Anor Aniyan, Mahato Mahiyan, Atma Asya Jantoho Nihito Guhayam. So this is a very famous verse of Katha Upanishad that expands this concept further. So this verse is very clear that it is actually giving you a view saying that unless you approach the attempt to know the Brahman as I am different, he is unlimited. I am limited, he is unlimited. That should be your approach to know the Brahman. If you start your journey by actually saying me and Brahman are the same, then the Yama's view in this particular verse is Ananya Prokte Gatiratra Nasti. Okay, so this is important here. So I want you to think about this Ananya. Again, when you read these verses, you should also look at what verse is coming before and what verse is coming afterwards. So if you go to the verse that is coming afterwards, that is even more important, and it is a very, very famous verse of Katha Upanishad. And immediately our friend Yama says, yes, I have said this. Ananya prokte gatiratra nasti, because this Brahman is Aniyan, he atarkyam anupramana. Remember aptarkyam. I have not discussed this atarkyam in this verse because he is beyond logic. That's what he says. He says this Supreme Brahman is beyond logic. He is unlimited. You cannot limit him by your own logical thinking, because when you limit him, then this is what happens. Narena avarena proktaha, because we limit him, but he is beyond our logical reasoning and he is atarkyam. So to expand that concept as to how the Supreme Brahman is beyond logic, he is beyond reasoning, immediately our friend Yama goes to this very, very famous verse of Katha Upanishad. Naisha tarkena matirapaneya prokta anyeneva sugnanaya preshta. Yam tvam apaha satya dhrutir batasi twadrug no bhuyat nachiketa preshta. So we'll come to the second half later, but I want to spend a lot of time talking about the first two verses, and hopefully over the next 30 minutes, we'll be able to make progress with another 2 or 3 verses in this particular section. So what did he says? Previous verse, he said, atarkyam, aniyan hi anupramanat atarkyam. And he said he is atarkyam, he is beyond logic. And then he said, qualifies that statement saying, Naisha tarkena matirapaneya prokta anyeneva sugnanaya preshtam. So what does that mean? Naisha tarkena matihi apaneya. Na esha tarkena matihi. Okay, so he cannot be grasped through logical reasoning. Okay, apaneya is a very interesting word. For those of you interested in the etymology of it, there are various discussions about this particular word called apaneya. So this is a compound word consisting of two words, aneya, apaneya. Okay, aneya means prove, apaneya means disprove. So when you combine aneya and apaneya, it becomes apaneya. That is the origin of that word, apaneya. So what does that mean? It means the existence of God can neither be proven nor disproven through logic. Neisha tarkena matihi apaneya or apaneya. Aneya or apaneya. So I hope that makes logical sense, in the sense that we cannot limit the unlimited with our own limited faculties. And with our own limited faculties, we try to bring some logical discussion and try and limit the unlimited. So need to be thinking about this particular problem. So I'm going to break there for a minute, and I want folks to contribute here, because why did Yama say Naisha Tarkena Matirapaneya, that he cannot be proven by reasoning? Why did he say that? What are the three ways in which we as souls with sadhana sharira can actually have access to any form of knowledge? Forget about knowledge of Brahman, but knowledge of everything in existence. After all, everything in existence includes what? It includes you and me and the external world and the supreme Brahman. This is all that is there in existence. So what are our routes to such knowledge? So who wants to take this up and give us some ideas as to what the thinking is before we go to the next slide?
Madhu, Suresh here, it's Agama, Pratyaksha and Anumana.
Thank you, Suresh. Do you want to expand on that? I know Pragnesh has also raised his hand, so you give your expansion and then I'll go to Pragnesh.
Yeah, either you anticipate, you correlate, or you experience, or you rely on validated manuscripts or references as three options to gain knowledge.
Thank you, Suresh. Pragnesh?
Not more to add. I thought you had already given the answers and Suresh has already expanded. So nothing more to add. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. So there are only three modes, there are only three ways in which, there are only three pramanas, anupramana as it's called. There are three modes of knowledge, either through perception, pratyaksha, or through logical thinking or logical reasoning called anumana, or then you have the verbal testimony. So our friend Yama has said, Naisha tarkena matihi apanena. Tarka is anumana. Tarka is logic. Logic is an inference. Logic is always an inferential knowledge. It is not an absolute knowledge. Why is that the case? So the question I have here is, can the creator be seen through sense perception? So who wants to take this? Pragnesh, do you want to come in? Can the creator be seen through sense perception?
Yes, we can evolve to that stage. And if we remove avidya, then we can see that.
So what
No, I would disagree with that. From the lessons we have had, we cannot perceive God with our indriyas. Unless we have the divine vision, divine indriyas, the soul can only then see Paramatma.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deval. Anybody else? Sudarshan?
Yeah, same what Deval has said. I don't think which our current Pancha Karmendriya, Jnanendriyas, we cannot do that. But we can use it as to go to the next stage, and maybe we need a separate, like you know, if you're going into space, you need a separate kind of paraphernalias, isn't it? Like, you know, whatever you go for hiking, you can't use it for to go to space. It has to be different. In the same way, you know, in order to view him or sense him, you need a different kind of indriyas. So I think you need to earn that.
Thank you, Sudarshan. So I think what Pragnesh was coming at is, eventually you need to see him, that aparoksha jnana. So unless you have aparoksha jnana or sakshatkara, then you don't even go into moksha. So I think that is where Pragnesh was coming in in his defense, that you have to see him at some point. Did I get that right, Pragnesh?
Yes, and we are on that journey. So I have been through the optician. They have identified refractory error. I am now proceeding to optician to get my glasses, and I hope that you are providing through these lessons that glasses will let me see what I am unable to see today.
Yeah, so these glasses are priceless, Pragnesh. But anyway, we will lend you the glasses here. So yeah, Pragnesh's analogy is beautiful, and that's exactly what he's talking about. Yes, both of us are right. Both I think Deval and Sudarshan as well as Pragnesh is right from different perspective. But the question here is, can the creator be seen through sense perception? And I think I'll give it to Deval, because she's thinking about using our senses, our sense organs. Can we see God? Our sense organs, the 5 sense organs that we have, eyes, ears, tongue, nose, and touch, these are evolved only because their purpose is to look outwards and feel the material world that is outside. You know, in Katha Upanishad itself, it comes paranchikani vyatrinate. So he actually talks about these problems, and we'll deal with those beautiful verses later. But this is the purpose of our external sense organs, which are involved in material things, whereas this fellow is non-material. So in that sense, there is no way in which we can see him through any of the material indriyas that we have, which could be these five. Mind is also an indriya. It is a sixth sense organ. Mind is the sixth sense organ. The mind also cannot perceive the supreme Brahman. Okay, so Pragnesh is right. So the only way of perceiving the supreme Brahman, who is inside us as our Antaryamin, is the soul itself, which is Swarupa Indriya, actually goes inwards and sees it, sees the Antaryamin. Yeah. So without that situation, there is no scope for us to see the creator through our eyes. So if there are fools out there who ask the question, I can't see God with my eyes, so he does not exist, you just have to shun them, as how Bible Matthew says, shun them, because these are blind fellows who don't even understand what is the scope of our material indriyas. And again, to expand that analogy further, the microscope, the Hubble tapes, the space telescopes, or the infrared microscope, or whatever other big instruments that we can have to look at the God particle or boson or whatever it is, we cannot see the Brahman because he's not material at all. Veda Vyasa put a very famous sutra called Arupavad Evahi Tat Pradhanatvat. Pradhana means matter. Tat, that supreme being, he is beyond Pradhana. And he is Arupavad. He doesn't have any material form. And if he doesn't have material form, how are you going to use your material indriyas to see him? No way you're going to say this. Rig Veda also talks about the same verse. There is a very famous verse there. Paro matraya tanva vrudana nate mahitvam anvashnuvanti nate vishnoho jayamano najato deva mahimnaha paramantamapa. So Paro matraya, he is beyond the Pancha Tanmatras, is beyond matter. So creators cannot be seen through perception. What about logical reasoning? Because that is what Yama has actually censured here, isn't it? Naisha tarkena matirapaneya. So even logic or reasoning, you cannot prove or disprove the existence of God. And we need to understand this. When these youngsters or fellows who claim themselves to be of greater intelligence, when they say we cannot see, so I can prove that God does not exist by logical reasoning. But you can say, look, we are not even making an attempt to know God through logical reasoning. Why is the case? Let us look at the logical inference itself. And we had this famous inference, isn't it? You are driving on the road and you're seeing smoke on the mountain. And when you see the smoke on the mountain, then you say there must be fire in the mountain. Why do you say that? Because in your kitchen, you have seen kitchen, when there is fire, there is smoke. You have seen that incidents before. So when you're driving, when you see the smoke, you're able to link that up, correlate, and then come up with a logical inference. So in this whole process, there are so many perceptions that are happening. What is the first perception? You're seeing the smoke. You're seeing the smoke with your material eyes. What is the second perception? Prior perception is what? You have seen smoke and you have seen fire before in the kitchen. So in logical reasoning, you still need material perception. You need at least two different material perceptions to have happened in two different time spans, two different time space correlations, two different perceptions have happened, and you're correlating this. Okay, so any logic, any reasoning that we use in the material world actually has perception as its base. Okay, there is always a perception. That is why logic is called anumana. Anumana means it is always a dependent proof. So when Acharya says nacha anumanasya niyata pramanyam, that is what he talks about. Logic and reasoning is always a dependent proof. Anu plus manam. Yeah. So logical reasoning is dependent on perception. And if you are going to be using your material perceptions, again with logic, you cannot prove or disprove God. Okay. And again, Immanuel Kant, some of you may be very familiar. He's a very, very important Western philosopher, a theistic Western philosopher. And he, in his famous book called Critique of Pure Reason, and he also goes very well with Upanishad's view that God cannot be known by pure reasoning. You may remember in several years, several months ago, we did this thingy called intelligent design, William Paley's argument. Does anybody remember this one? William Paley's intelligent design of a watchmaker's argument. Anybody wants to take this on? They will go for it.
I think my understanding is that if you're walking on the street and see a watch, and you open up the watch and see what an intricate design it is. So each part is made by an intelligent person, and the argument is that the creator of that individual parts also must be superlative. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you got the gist of it there. Well, thank you very much. So William Paley's intelligent design argument is, look, you cannot see, that is a logical reasoning to show existence of God, but again, that has got limitations. That particular view, William Paley's argument also has got a limitation, because as Deval said, you pick up the watch and then you open it up, it's so intricate inside. So then you say, this is such an intricate mechanism, there has to be an intelligent being behind this that has created this. And that is the argument for the creation of the universe. This universe is so intricate, so there must be an intelligent design behind this, and there must be an intelligent designer behind it, and that designer is God. Okay, so that is a logical explanation. It makes sense. But if you're a purist, you would say watch actually has got multiple parts. Each part is again made by somebody else. So if you take William Paley's argument, multiple creators need to be proposed because there are different components to the watch. Each component is intricate, must have been designed by somebody. So that is also a counter argument that you can put in, saying that yes, we understand there has to be an intelligent person behind this, but if you stretch William Paley's argument a bit too much, then you will land up accepting multiple creators, and we don't want multiple creators. Vedanta is very clear. There is only one supreme creator. There may be a lot of assistants, but there is only one supreme creator. So again, these are all some of the interesting problems of logical reasoning or logic to explain the existence or the non-existence of God. So then what we have to do? So prokta, so what is the solution to this problem? So our Yama then says, prokta anyenaiva sugnanaya preshta. So this is important. So remember in the previous verse, he said, ananya prokte gatiratra nasti. And immediately he brings this word anyena. Okay, the opposite of ananya is anya. So prokta anyena eva sugnaya preshta. So this has got two different approaches to it, and that makes it interesting. So let us take the second approach, which is the easier version, because we have discussed so far as to how logical reasoning and perception cannot give us the knowledge of the Brahman. So it has to be something different from perception and logical reasoning. So who is going to answer that question? What is it that is different from perception and logical reasoning that is the only route to knowing the Supreme? So that is the Agama, as Suresh ji was mentioning. So anyena, from one perspective, would mean you need a different tool. You need a different tool to know about the Supreme Brahman. So anyena. So different from perception and logic. So that is a second view on this verse. But the first and the more important view on this verse is anyena means different. So what is going on here? Yama and Nachiketa are having a discussion on Brahman. So your starting point is that you are different from Brahman. Prokta Anyena eva. So unless you start your journey with that view that I am Anu, he is Vibhu. I am Alpagnya, I am nobody, he is Sarvagnya. I am Alpakarta, I can't even bake a cake properly, but he is the creator of the universe, Sarvakarta. I am Dukhi, every day in my life, I am always going through suffering. Whereas he is Paramasuki, he is always in infinite bliss. So such is the ocean of difference between Jivas and Brahman. And that is how you start your philosophical journey. So Prokta Anyena Eva Sugnaya Preshta. Okay, so then only you start making the journey of knowledge towards Shreyas, and eventually you know him better, get his grace, and then eventually you attain moksha. So this is very, very clear from Yama's view that unless you understand this, Prokta Anyena Eva Suknaya Preshta. Whereas in the previous line he said, Ananya Prokte Gatiratra Nasti. He who thinks he is the same as Brahman, there is no future for him, is what Yama is saying in the previous verse. And immediately in this verse he has said, Prokta Anyena Eva Suknanaya Preshta. And that person who first understands that he is different from Brahman, then what will he do? He will not use his sensory organs or his logic to know about the person, but he will again use Anyena eva Sugnaya Preshta. He will use an entirely different tool, entirely different from perception and logic. So what is that? That is the Shastra or the Vedas. So I am going to break for a minute there, and I'm going to ask, what is Shastra, and what is Shastra? Is it different from Vedas? What does it all mean? Because as you know, in the third sutra, Badarayana said, first sutra he said Atato Brahma Jignasa. Second sutra he said Janmadhyasya Yataha. Then third sutra he said Shastra Yonitvat. Okay, he can be known only through the Shastras. So I am going to break for a minute to get you guys to think about this. What is Shastras? Who is going to come first?
The Shastras are not written by anyone. It is Apaurisheya. We all the rishis meditated and then saw it, felt, heard it, felt it. No, they. I don't know what word it is. It is Apaurisheya. It is seen by them, seen by the rishis.
Yeah. Thank you, Pratibhaji. I think you're talking about Shruti there. You're talking about Shruti, which is also called Vedas, which is Apaurishya. So that is fine. That is perfectly fine. So that comes under it comes under the umbrella of Shastra. So we got somebody who is Pragnesh. He is saying something Smriti, Shruti, and Puranas. So Pragnesh has answered that all these come under Shastras. Okay, so that's fine. So let's run through some of the key verses here. So I think all of you are right. So Shastra Yonitvad, and Veda Vyasa is very clever. He didn't say Veda Yonitvad. When we did those Brahma Sutra sessions, we discussed all this. Why did Veda Vyasa say Shastra Yonitvad? He could have said Om Veda Yonitvad. You can know him only through the Vedas. No, he gave a very general, far-reaching scope for knowing Brahman. Okay, in fact, Pippala the Shruti, we know this one. Na indriyani na anumanam, vedahi evayenam tasmad ahuhu vedaha. So that instrument through which we can know the Supreme Brahman is called Veda. So that Veda can be Apaurushaya Veda, but it can be other scriptures that also inform us of the Brahman. And then Taitareya Brahmanam again said that if you do not know the Vedas, then you can't attain moksha. Na avedavin manute idam bruhantam sarva anubhum atmanam samparaya. Acharya in Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya, he gives a very important definition of what is Shastras. Sadagamaika Vigneyam Samatita Ksharaksharam Narayanam Sadavande Nirdosha Asesha Sadgunam. Sad Agamas. So Sad Agamas are called Shastras. So what are the Sadagamas? What are all the Agamas? As Pragnesh ji mentioned, the scope of this is huge. Brahmanda Purana actually gives a definition of it. Rigadya Bharatam Chaiva Pancharatra Mata Akilam Mula Ramayanam Chaiva Puranam Cha Etadatmakam Yeche Anuyayinas Tesham Sarvete Cha Sadagamaha. Okay, these Sadagamas are the Shastras. So you have the four Vedas, then you have the Pancharatra Agama, then you have Mula Ramayana, and then you have Puranas, and then you have Mahabharata. So these are all fundamental 7 texts. Then anything that concurs with these are also called Sadagamas. So in that sense, you and me discussing today is also Sadagamas, because we are all discussing something that is in tune with these 7. Yeah, so this whole thing is called Shastra, and Yama says, he who approaches the Supreme using this instrument called Shastra, he alone has a scope for knowing. Sugnanaya Preshta. So Prokta Anyena Eva Sugnanaya Preshta is a very interesting verse. Think about it. It opens up in various different angles. So then what Yama said, Yam Tvam Apaha Satya Dhrutir Batasi Twag Tvagdrunno Bhuya Nachiketa Preshta. So this is an easy sentence. I will just go through this. Yam Tvam Apaha, that you have obtained or will obtain, that knowledge that you will obtain, Satya Dhritihi Batasi, through the truth that is not obtained by logic, but I have obtained it, Yama, by my own experience. I have had this, I've had the knowledge and I've experienced that knowledge. I have had the aparoksha jnana and I've experienced the Brahman. So that truth that is not obtained by logic, but obtained by me by experience. You are firmly after truth. You are after satyasya satyam. So I will explain it to you. Remember, he is still Yama is still, Nachiketa has asked for the third boon, and this conversation is still going on about whether I had to give you third boon or not. And then Yama is very impressed with how determined Nachiketa is. So in this context, he is describing all this. You are firmly after truth. I know this by experience. Tvad drugno bhuyan nachiketaha preshta. So he praises him. Like you, Nachiketa, who is there? Where can I find a student like you, Nachiketa, who is rare to get? I cannot get another student. You have come to my doorstep. I have to make this opportunity to actually teach you this. I should actually get more students who are only after truth, known through experience only, but not by dry logic. So by doing this whole paraphernalia and discussion, what you need to understand here is there are two, Yama is doing various examination of the student to understand whether Nachiketa is really worthy of getting this knowledge. First, if you can recall, he gave him a lot of material things. Take this, take wealth, take land, take stuff from Devaloka to test him whether he will be, tempted by material things and will be distracted by material things, so that he may not have that interest to know about the non-material higher truths. And then Nachiketa clearly demonstrated in that he is not interested in material things, but he is only interested in trans-empirical things. So our friend Nachiketa, our friend Yama was very impressed with Nachiketa at that time. But Yama is still not prepared to give him the full knowledge of this Brahman that he knows. Okay, he is beginning to test Nachiketa from a slightly different perspective of now actually praising Nachiketa. He starts saying, oh, you are such a great student. You're so humble. You're so pleasant. You're so respectful. And he starts praising him. Why is he start praising him? Anybody wants to take this? Why is praising another examination? Who wants to take this quiz? And we need to watch for that also.
Yeah, I said because just to see whether is egoistic, is he just being humble? When you prize, the other person should be humble, and if he's not, that means he has not reached that level of education. We cannot give him sort of the knowledge.
Wonderful answer, Sudarshan. Absolutely right and spot on. So that is what Yama's intention here is. He wants to test Nachiketa and say whether if I praise him, this fellow is going to get egoistic or not. Because once ego comes in, that is the downfall. Yeah, and we need to be very, very conscious of this. And the language of the Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, is very, very relevant to us. Because in our daily work, for example, once we hear somebody praising us, suddenly some ego comes in and we suddenly think that we are the biggest folks in our place of work. That is what we need to be very mindful and watch. And as you go through the next verse, you will understand how Nachiketa reacts to that and how Yama picks that up, and then the philosophical discussion happens. Okay, so there is this very complicated verse, but I think we should take it up next week. This is a very, very important verse, and I don't think I could do justice with it for 10, in 10 minutes. I don't think I can do justice to this. But what does he say? Janami aham sheshadir anityam nahi adhruvaihi prapyatehi dhruvantat. Okay, so he goes on to talk about this, and he now goes to the second mechanism, second approach of praising Nachiketa, and he says, "Janami aham shevadir iti anityam." So I know, yes, I get it. You are looking like you're somebody who's humble, who is after knowledge, and then he'll say, "Look, yes, I will teach you. Janami aham. I know this. Shevadir iti anityam. I know this. The material wealth that I've offered you is all transient. I know this myself, but I'm going to talk to you about higher things." And then he will say how big you are. And so there are these words called anityam that comes, and there is this word called adruvam and dhruvam that comes in this particular verse of Katha Upanishad. So these are quite, the best way of thinking about this is something called Kabbalistic interpretation. As you know, from Jewish text, if you want to read the Torah, or if you want to have the deeper philosophical understanding of the Bible, for example, the scholars of the Jewish scholars and the Catholic scholars, they use this technique called Kabbalah, Kabbalistic interpretation. So to understand this mantra, you need to have that Kabbalistic interpretation of how to approach this. And there are two ways of approaching this mantra, which is very interesting. For example, Anityam can be broken into A plus Nityam. Adhruvam can be broken into A plus Dhruvam. Then we need to understand what the Dhruvam actually means. And Dhruva Nakshatra, there is the story of Dhruva. So we can bring all these things and have a fruitful discussion. But what I'll do is I'll keep it for next week. And we will close today's session with that particular verse, because we got 3 more verses that comes. Yeah, after those 3 more verses, and then once our Yama is convinced that Nachiketa is actually really humble and wants to get this philosophical knowledge, then he says, okay, let me start proper philosophy here. And then he says, Sarve Vedaha Yat Padamamananti Tapamsi cha Sarvani cha Yad Vadanti Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimi Omitetat. So we will come to that. I'm sure at some point we'll come to that. I keep promising you that I want to come to this particular verse, but the previous verses themselves are so pregnant with thought that I think we have to do justice to what Yama is saying before we come to this verse and actually understand the significance of it. Now, this particular verse, I think, will take about 2 to 3 weeks for us to capture in all its glory. And we probably will do a session on Om Iti Etat. And we'll have to go back to Mandukya Upanishad, where we learned everything about Om. And that is what Yama is talking about. And that is the beauty of Upanishad Chintana, where we don't take one Upanishad in isolation. We take Gita Upanishad and we also take other Upanishads and bring everything together and understand the gravity of what Yama is saying. So we will deal with that in the subsequent classes. So on that note, I'm going to close today's session, and thank you very much for listening. Krishna Pranamastu. Any questions? We can do it now. Okay.
Namaste, Madhusudanji.
Jagadish, yes, hello.
Yes, we thank you for the session today. It was amazing. As so you talked about tarka earlier. So I was just wondering, one shloka from Acharya has nahi tarkena bhagavan asti iti sadetum shakyate yadi shakyate nasti ityapi sadem shakyate anumanam tarko nama. So how does this correlates? I mean, is it the same, similar? What am I telling Nachiketa and or us pretty much?
So, so that particular famous verse from Acharya that you are talking about, Jagadish ji, yes, I think they're all, I mean, everybody's talking the same thing there. I think the ideas are very similar. Yeah.
Okay. So it says also like tarka is only through the Anumana. So that's what also this very similarly he's also talking here as well.
Yeah. So the Anumana is a very broad definition for
Right.
various components. That is, Anumana, Upapatti, they're all Tarka, they're all coming. Acharya has brought it all under one scope, which and that is the Anumana. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, I was going to request Harish Ji to take us through Om and we close today's session. Thank you very much, everyone. So just as a reminder, next week we have chapter 11, Gita Chintana, and Harish and his team are going to take us through chapter 11, which, as you know, is an amazing chapter again. So look forward to the presentations and the quiz. And I'm also going to request all of us to do some homework and do some reading as well, please. So we'll meet up next Sunday for Gita Chintana, chapter 11. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Mother.
Thank
Leave
you, Mother.
for 3 Sundays, please.
Yeah. Pragnesh, you have a safe trip and return safely, please, from Colombia. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.